Thank you all so much. Let me start at the beginning. In the beginning, there was work. Before the fall of man, work was actually a part of God's plan of a perfect world. He created this world, then he put man in it, and he said, I've got a job for you to do. And then he brought along a companion and said, it's not so good for you just to do this job on your own. Let me bring you a team to work on it. And brought along a companion. And I think that it's easy that whenever we think of work, that we can not see it as something that's actually a part of God's plan. And partially this is because when the fall occurred, one of the first things he says to the man is, now your work is going to become laborious. And it's going to be with sweat and pain and difficulty. And so this really ideal creation of what work was meant to be for us became distorted and broken. But it's God's intention, as well as with that companionship created between man and woman, which is our marriage and our family, our relationship with him, which became broken. He wants to repair these things, but he also wants to repair what he intended at the beginning for our work to be, which was an incredible place where incredible things can happen. Some institutions have done some data and found that the average working adult spends just over a third of their waking hours in the workplace. And actually, at first, when I thought about that, it was a depressing reality. It was actually true that in my working life, I was actually spending more time at the office with my colleagues than I was with my own family. And I think that if we maybe don't want to, but if we scratched out the hours, we'd realize, oh, that's true. I spend more time with that guy across from me at the desk than I do with my own spouse. But I don't think that has to be a depressing point of view. Rather, I think it can be something that God wants to illuminate us. This is something he orchestrated for something very special. Because, see, a community is a group of people that spend a significant amount of time together, that share common goals and interests, and have deep, meaningful connections with one another. That's really what a community is. And right away I can say that you absolutely have the first two with the people of your workplace. You spend significant amounts of time together. You have common interests and goals. But it actually makes me think of this wonderful reality TV show in America. You may have heard of it. It's called The Office. Anyone heard of The Office? Yeah, it started here, didn't it? But The Office just seems like a big joke, and I know that in reality TV that's not real. But I know people who would watch the show and said, I can't watch this show because it reminds me too much of what it's like in my own office. These quirky characters, this bizarre boss. And I actually love the show. I've watched the whole thing. And what's beautiful about it is these writers who aren't thinking about the church or God's plan or anything like that can't help but write into this goofy story these touching moments where these people who, at first they're just tolerating each other's presence, begin to realize we're living life together. And so then what happens is a community is having these deep, meaningful connections, but what makes it become care is when we start to become intentional and considerate about those deep, meaningful connections that are happening all around us, that maybe we're just not regarding it. And that immediately makes me think of a particular line that was shared by Jacob. Jacob in Genesis 28. In Genesis 28, he goes on a journey from his home to what would actually be the new job he was going to take up with his uncle Laban. And on the way there, nighttime fell, and so he decided to make camp. And actually, it was a depressing camp. I love camping. He didn't do it well. He just grabbed a stone as his pillow, and that was it. So he goes to sleep, and not surprisingly, he has a funny dream. It was actually a dream from the Lord. And when he woke up from the dream, this special dream, the Lord spoke to him in that dream. And he woke up and he says this powerful line in Genesis 28:16. It says that after he woke, he said, surely the Lord is in this place, and I did not know it. Surely the Lord is in this place, and I did not know it. But what's funny about that is, was it that he stumbled in the desert upon a place where the Lord was? No. The Lord was with him wherever he was going. He actually took that stone that he used as a pillow and he built an altar out of it. Something that for years was still there that people would come to and remember, wow, that particular place just happens to be where God is. No. God was with Jacob on the journey, and God was with Jacob in the desert. And that pillow, that stone, which he turned into a pillow, became this sacred thing. And when I think about that, I think, boy, how often we sit in our ergonomic chair and our frustrated cubicle or our workspace, and we don't consider the possibility that that place is sacred. But I'd like for you to consider that surely the Lord is in that place. Maybe we just don't know it yet. Surely maybe the Lord is in that place because you're in that place. And wherever you are, that means there's potential for the Lord to be there. And that's why you're there. And so if we think about it that way, then all of a sudden these bizarre characters, maybe people who we say, I hate that person, I don't like to work with them, they have that personality flaw that just clashes with mine. The reality is that's actually somebody that God has placed you next to. That's somebody that you're spending a significant amount of time with, that you have some common interest and goals, even if it's just work-related. And there are deep and meaningful connections that if we allow it, can become caring, they can become intentional, and we can become considerate in the middle of that. So I'd like for you to just right now, as I'm speaking, just begin to think about the people that are in your workplace. Maybe there's somebody that you spend a significant amount of time with because they work in the cubicle next to you. Or it's a team member that you meet with a lot. You're always sitting next to one another in the same boring meetings all day long. Maybe you have a really exciting job, but I do actually. My meetings can be boring, but I even enjoy my meetings. But I want you to consider that person. I actually want you to think of an actual person right now. Get their name in your mind. Hopefully you know enough about them to know their surname as well. And just think that name in your head right now. And just hold that person's face in your mind and your interactions with them. And I want to challenge you in this area. Begin to show genuine interest in that person. Their hopes, their dreams, their ambitions, their worries, their heartache, the things that you don't get to know are going on in their personal life, but without a doubt on their hardest day, they probably sat next to you that whole day. And begin to show a genuine interest in that person. And let that flesh out with inviting them on a walk to M&S to grab a sandwich. And along the way, ask questions about what's going on in their life, about their family, about their most recent holiday. Show genuine interest. And then, as you're beginning to do that, do the second thing. Pray one sentence for them each workday. And in your prayer, just praying that one sentence, invite God to use you however and whenever. No pressure on you. Actually, go ahead and feel free to put the pressure on God. God, I'm just giving this person to you. However and whenever I can be of service to you in your work in their life, I'm just telling you, God, I'm up for it. So maybe it sounds like this. Please will you bless Ruth with her best life through you. Also, please do use me however and whenever to influence them toward you. It can be as simple as that. In fact, I would invite you to steal that prayer, change the name Ruth that I've placed in here with the person that you thought of, and just start praying that every day. There's something powerful that happens when we start to pray for somebody. The powerful thing that happens is God begins to impress upon you his experience with that person. I mean, he was there when they were being formed in the womb. He was there in the formation of their personality, sometimes those tragic moments of their life. He, the Father, cares so much about them and wants, he has a journey that he's going on with them, and you just happen to be someone along that journey for a period of time, 4 years, 5 years, and for sometimes 20 or 30 years. And if you begin to say, God, along this journey that you're on, the whole lifelong journey with them, but here I am on this short stretch of that journey, use me however and whenever. And then the third challenge here is, as the relationship progresses, just obey any nudge if and when they come from the Spirit. And sometimes that nudge can be powerful because it comes from the person when they ask you a question you totally didn't expect them to ask you. And just know that's a nudge from the Holy Spirit. It's time to have a deep conversation. Or maybe one day you feel something that inside actually almost feels like a physical nudge to say or to do something. And in that moment, because you've been praying that prayer every day, you can say, I think I'm going to act on that. I'm going to encourage you to do that. And let me just share with you a couple of stories. So I've been trying to think about this idea of, in the beginning, there was this garden, and there was this work that was holy. And when I think about it from a garden perspective, I think there are two kinds of things that I do in the garden. When I'm planting grass seed, I'll just buy a bag full of seeds and I'll just sprinkle them across. And I really don't need to do any more than make sure they get spread out, and the rain will water them. And whereas there are other seeds that I carefully purchase, I carefully plant, I carefully prepare the soil, I pay attention to, I'm careful about how much sunlight they get, how much water they get, what kind of nutrients the soil they're in needs. I'm thinking about all those things. And I want you to think about those are the two types of relationships that we're sort of tending to. We're like gardeners in this place that is our workplace. And for me, I think of the strangers I visit, I sit alongside of on the train as that scatter seed. That seed that I just scatter around. I don't have a lifelong relationship with them. In fact, my relationship with them is the next 15 minutes until I have to change trains. But it might just be that I can just sprinkle something into their lives in that few moments. And I'm going to come back to that in just a minute. Whereas there's the other person I sit across from at work, and that's somebody that I'm being careful about. What am I giving them on a day-to-day basis? I'm asking the Lord I'm in it for the long haul. Even if the long haul is just, I know I'll be here on my contract just 1 year. But in this year, that's a pretty long time. You just spend a third of your waking hours with this person, that I can be more intentional about my time with them. Well, I've been trying my best to do this with strangers on the train, that first part. And what I've been doing is I'll sit next to somebody and I'll get a knot in my stomach because I know that I'm about to do something that you do not do in England. Talk to somebody on the train. How dare you? And it takes a lot of courage, and I don't always have it. And there are many days that go by that I just go, and they get up at that next stop, and I go, oh gosh, I didn't say anything to them. I'm so glad they got off. But then there are certain days when I actually utter the words, excuse me, would you mind holding a conversation while we're on the train together? No, you would be so surprised. I get so many laughs. Also, it's funny, the people on the train here in London, they're always listening in. If you're having a conversation, they're always paying attention. So I'll do this, and I'll hear somebody 3 spaces down go, At one point I had the whole carriage laughing. We don't do this here, man! You know, like, we don't do this in America either. It's weird everywhere, trust me. But I'm always surprised that more times than not, the person goes, sure, let's have a conversation. And then I do the next one. I say, I'd like to talk about Jesus. And you think that this is the point when they go, oh no. Surprisingly, more times than not, they go, all right. And sometimes I'll ask them a question and say, tell me what your experience is with Jesus, and what do you know about him, what do you think about him? Or I'll tell them a story. And oftentimes before they get off the train, I'll talk to them about the story of the Christmas Carol, where there were 2 business partners, Jacob Marley, Ebenezer Scrooge. And Jacob Marley dies, and his partner Ebenezer Scrooge is running the business. But then one night near Christmas, he is visited by the ghost of his old work colleague. And he says, Ebenezer, you're going to be visited very soon by 3 separate ghosts. And I'm just telling you now that these visitations matter, and you need to pay attention to what they want to talk to you about. Well, it was a frightening enough experience for Ebenezer Scrooge that he was paying attention then to these strange visitors that he would receive. You know how the story goes. I'll actually mention that to the person on the train, and I'll say, listen, I don't know you, you don't know me. The very little you know about me is that I am a crazy person, but I'd like for you just to consider this. Consider the possibility that I'm like Jacob Marley, and I'm just letting you know that I think that God may want to say something to you. And so just pay attention to the possibility that over the next few days, few weeks, or few months, you may have some more visitations. And then I imagine, because I walk away from that, and I'll never know what happened from there. But I imagine the possibility that 3 weeks from now, some random person will start a conversation with them about their faith life. And at first they're ready to go, not again, but instead they remember that conversation with that weirdo on the train who said, just consider entertaining the conversation. And then maybe it happens again, and then maybe all of a sudden their heart is caught up. And just like Ebenezer Scrooge, transformation takes place in their life. And it just took me obeying and having enough guts just to say in the next 15 minutes we're sitting next to them, can I talk to you about Jesus? And let me tell you, I don't usually say anything that's all that profound. I'm usually kicking myself, like, that was weird. Why did I say that little bit? Why did I tell that story? And that was a weird question. And, oh, they thought I was a weird person. But I don't know what's happening, but I know that there's a possibility. No, there's an absolute certainty that God's on a journey with them. And I'm just playing a part. But then there's that other person that's just at work with you. And this person that's at work with you is somebody that you get a little bit more time with. And I'd like to tell you just a quick story before we go into discussion about someone who I'll call for this story, Jackson. And Jackson was somebody who, I was the COO of the company, and he was part of the sales team. And so, and he was actually an underperforming salesperson, and so I was given the task of work your magic and get him to be doing awesome. So we were spending a lot of time together, and I was having to deal with all these rough issues. And in fact, I started to pick up on some things. I have a little bit of an intuition, and I began to pick up that there was some crisis in his personal life. But that wasn't for me to touch. It just so happens that I was invited to speak at a weekend conference that was specifically designed to be for people who didn't attend church. And the big question was, well, then how do we get them to come to a conference weekend that's all about meeting with God? And I was told by the guy who runs it, he wanted me to come there and do a session. He said, well, you'd be surprised who says yes if you ask them. And so I began to think about, just like I asked you to think about one person. And I took this one person, Jackson, and I began to just think about him and say, okay, God, I can't imagine him ever saying yes to this. I mean, he was this kind of guy that would never do this kind of thing. But I began to think about it and pray about it. And one time we were on a sales trip together. We were flying together. And I turned over to him and I said, hey, in a few weeks I'm about to go away to this weekend thing I'm going to be speaking on. And I wanted to know if you'd be interested in coming with me. It's weird. Would you like to go on a weekend away together? And he goes, what sort of thing is it? And I said, well, it's going to be a weekend where it's just time to consider the possibility of having an encounter with God. Gold? Like, here's where the weird stuff happens. And he goes, okay. And I was out of my mind. He did not just say okay to this. Like, that's so weird for him to say okay, but he did. Well, then we land, a few weeks go by, everything's been arranged, and we're going to drive there together. It's about a 4-hour drive. He's a salesperson, so he's really talkative, he's got a big personality, he's one of the funnest people I know. But we get in the car, and I'm doing all the talking, and he is just like a brick wall the entire drive. And so after an hour and a half, I point this out to him. I said, Jackson, you've been sitting here with me, you're the most talkative and fun person I know, you're not saying a thing, what's going on? And he says to me, I have absolutely no idea why I said yes to this. There's this thing inside of me thinking, God made you say yes. Sometimes when we obey, God says, here, I'll help, and puts a yes in someone's mouth, that they're ready to say no, and they say yes. Well, then we get to the event, and it's just as awkward as he thought it would be. All these guys talking about God, and he's just zipping his lip. He doesn't want to talk about it. He tells me more than once on day one that I can't believe you got me into this. And I told him, no pressure, man. There's all sorts of fun things to do. You and I will hang out. Let's go play a game of this. Let's go play a game of that. And it was on the final night, very last session. He's been a complete brick wall the entire time. And I actually am the one who's doing the speaking at this night. And at the end I say, hey, this is our last night together. And I just want to say before we leave, if there's anything you'd like to talk about, if there's somebody here you'd like to pray with you about something, then before you leave, we'd love to do that. Otherwise, you're dismissed. And what's really great about this event is actually nobody left. They all stayed in their seat and were considering things. And then my friend Jackson stands up and he walks over to me and he looks at me and he says, I don't know what's going on, but I need to talk to you about something very personal in life. And he starts crying. And he confesses a drug addiction that he's experiencing. He just found out his wife is pregnant with his second child, and he doesn't want to have this drug addiction in his life, and he's crying, and he's telling me about it, and he's just pouring his life out, and I wrap my arms around him, and I don't go giving him a bunch of advice. I just say, hey man, I'm so proud of you that you'd be willing to confess something like that. That is a noble effort to try to live this in your life. I know it's not going to be easy, but hey, guess what? Monday morning, we're going to be together, and I'm happy to help you in any way I can. And we went back to work together on Monday morning, and then we started to meet on a regular basis just to talk about how he could stick to that commitment he was trying to make. And I was just so amazed that it all began with this guy that would never in a million years say yes to this event. But all it took was me asking. the hard question that was sort of awkward, but it was because I felt this nudge. And so I just want you to consider the possibility that that person in your office, possibly that person that is the last person that would ever consider talking to you about their faith, or even coming with you to church or to a small group, or maybe to a weekend event such as I spoke of, would say yes. But I think that you'll be surprised that if you go with God on this and you say, God, I'm willing to let my workplace become a community in which you are growing and touching people's lives, and I'll be the person there. And surely the Lord can be in that place, just like He is here in this church, if we allow it. So my challenge to you is to allow it, to be a party to it. And so here are the questions that you will consider in your groups. Question 1 is, how can you invest in the community at your workplace? 2, who is someone that you can become more intentional with in relationship building and prayer? And 3, what new practice will you introduce? This isn't the third one, is it? What obstacles do you foresee standing in the way of investing in relationships at work? And so, Tim, I'll let you coach us through this portion. Yeah, thanks.